Hi everyone, this is Jen Curtis, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about optimal breathing mechanics. This applies to anyone who is human, but unsurprisingly I like to talk about this in the context of pre- and postnatal health and pelvic health and women's health. So in this video I'm going to talk about the anatomy of these breathing mechanics, the mechanics themselves, the importance of proper breathing mechanics, and what tends to go wrong. So first of all, let's look at the anatomy. I'm going to draw a person here. This is the rib cage. This is the pelvis. I can put in some legs here, the spine, and the head. Now on this body is a diaphragm, which sits at the bottom of the rib cage in a dome kind of shape, going up into the rib cage. The pelvic floor sits exactly the mirror image of the diaphragm at the top of the pelvis, in a dome facing down into the pelvis, and then the abdominal muscles are here. And this is currently often referred to as the core canister because it looks like a Coke can, diaphragm, pelvic floor, and abdominal/back muscles. It's a closed pressure system, and all of our abdominal organs are contained in this abdominal space. So that's the anatomy of the core and the core canister, and all of these muscles contribute to proper breathing mechanics. So when we breathe in, the air goes in through our mouth or nose into our lungs, and the diaphragm, which sits at the bottom of the rib cage, contracts and flattens. So it's kind of like a dome, and it flattens down into a pancake, and the diameter increases, which essentially kind of pushes the bottom of our rib cage out. So this dome contracts and flattens like this, down, contracts and flattens, making this bit wider. And this pushes our abdominal organs south towards the pelvic floor. Our abdominal organs are our intestines, stomach, liver, and then all the pelvic organs down here at the bottom. The pelvic floor goes with the diaphragm. So the pelvic floor also descends into the pelvis. I've probably drawn it a little bit low here, but it will descend and stretch and relax on that in-breath as the diaphragm pushes the abdominal organs into it. And the abdominal muscles will also expand outwards. So the air goes in, diaphragm contracts and flattens, pushes the abdominal organs south into the abdomen and into the pelvic floor, and the pelvic floor and abdomen will stretch outwards. There will be an excursion of these muscles outwards, and they will relax and stretch. Then on the out breath, let's change colours, the out breath, the exact opposite will happen. So air is going, well, not all the way from our pelvic floor, but we can imagine it that way, going out like this. The pelvic floor and the abdominal muscles, which were stretched on the in-breath, then recoil back to their original position. They don't do a huge contraction, a maximal contraction. They just go from being stretched back to their resting position. So pelvic floor muscles and abdomen recoil, go back to their original position, and this in turn pushes those pelvic organs and the abdominal organs back north towards the diaphragm, which will relax and ascend into the rib cage. As it does that, if you think of it flat like a pancake, as it does that, it pulls the rib cage in with it, and this action pushes air out of the lungs and out of the mouth or nose. Okay, the in-breath is an active contraction of the diaphragm, and the out-breath is the passive recoil of those stretched muscles, stretched pelvic muscles and abdominal muscles back to their original position, which pushes the abdominal organs up into the diaphragm and pushes air out. Okay, so that's the basic cycle of a full breath, and that's without talking about intra-abdominal pressure and intrathoracic pressure and things like that. Just super simple, just like how those muscles will function. So that's the mechanics of it. The importance of it is this. When we're breathing like that, and I hope you can see that because I can see there's a little shine here. When we're breathing like that, the pelvic floor muscles and the abdominal muscles will go through this stretch and contract cycle all the way through the day. With every breath you take, even just at quiet breathing, it will be smaller, and then with heavier breathing when you exercise, it will be bigger. But they will constantly be going through this small cycle, and this contributes to good pelvic health, good tension, but not too much tension in those muscles, and it contributes to good tone of those. So it contributes to good tone of those muscles, and this can contribute to good pelvic floor health, and good. Often when we have pelvic floor dysfunction, or when we have dysfunction with the abdominal muscles, so diastasis recti, or that mummy tummy and bulging of the muscles, often this is a contributing factor. So what usually goes wrong is that people breathe up into their chest. They have a strong chest breathing pattern. So rather than breathing down into those into those muscles down below, they breathe up into the chest, and the shoulders go up, and often the abdominal muscles actually go in on that in-breath, and this is referred to as paradoxical breathing, because it's not how things are really built to work. This can be problematic because those abdominal muscles and pelvic floor muscles aren't going through that stretch contract cycle, and so they're not getting that little bit of activity and tone all day every day. And the other reason why it's not so great for us is because breathing up into our chest and into our shoulders, we activate auxiliary breathing muscles that are secondary. They're not really there for quiet breathing. They're there for when we need to take an extra big breath and suck more air into our lungs, like when we're being chased by a lion. So that breathing up into our chest also activates our sympathetic nervous system and can make us more stressed, and then the stress makes us breathe up more into our chest, and then it goes into this negative cycle. Oftentimes when we have back pain or pelvic floor dysfunction or diastasis recti or all kinds of core dysfunction, that we can group them together in that under that umbrella term. This is often a missing link. It's often something that, or even tension in the pelvic floor, or hypertension in the pelvic floor. This is often overlooked. It's a stage that trainers and sometimes physios don't look at and don't consider and don't address before moving on to other more complex issues. And I've seen many trainees who have this kind of who have a kind of chest breathing pattern, and when you correct that breathing pattern and improve that breathing pattern and bring them into a more organic breathing pattern, bring them back to what they should be doing, it tends to improve symptoms of fill in the blank, whether it's back pain or pelvic floor dysfunction of all sorts. It's not to say that the breathing will cause it. It can just be a contributing factor, and addressing it can really help to improve and to improve the function of all of these muscles. This is what they were built to do. This is the first function of the core. Most people think of the core as planks, crunches, and bicycle kicks and things like that, and it's not. The first function of the core is breathing. Super important for addressing core dysfunction of all kinds. Just a little note on why this goes wrong. Like, if this is so natural, why does this happen? That's what lots of people ask me. We don't really know, but it does go wrong in lots of people. A guy called Leon Chaitau wrote an entire book on breathing pattern disorders. Really fascinating book. If you want to check it out, I'll link it below. It does happen, and it's probably to do with over cueing or incorrect cueing, like being told to stand up straight and suck our tummies in, the obsession with flat tummies, and so constantly sucking those muscles in, or being told to constantly hold our pelvic floor in. This kind of messes with the whole system. It doesn't work properly if we're constantly clenching the abdominal muscles or the pelvic floor muscles or the diaphragm for that matter. We want them to go through that cycle all day, every day. We want them to be able to relax, but we also want them to be able to contract and do everything in between. We don't need to be clenching them really tight to go about our daily tasks or arguably to do anything. We want to match the tension to the task, and over clenching and over recruiting those muscles often isn't helpful and leads to a cycle of dysfunction and pain and problems and so on and so forth. So it's just about balancing. It's just about going back to what these muscles are supposed to do, and just restoring that balance in the system, in that core system. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. I tried to keep it mega concise and to the point. I'm not very good at that. So if you did like this, if you did find it useful, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you want more information like this. And if you have any questions, put it in the comments below. Thanks very much for listening.